Ellie, live there from Westminster outside the Supreme Court, and let's get reaction from one of Somerset's MPs. James Heappey is the Conservative Wells MP. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Ben. I'm looking across Parliament Square towards, I guess, where Ellie is standing at the moment. So how are you?
And it's of course been the site of everyone's attentions this morning, a huge focus on it, and rightly so as well. What's your reaction to what happened 2 hours ago? How do you feel about it?
Well, I have to say that when the High Court case was lost in the autumn, my view back then, and I think I sort of might have written it in my column in the local paper, is that, look, rather than resorting to all of this legalese, just put a vote before Parliament. I'm certain that Parliament will vote to uphold the result of the referendum and to trigger Article 50 in the timeline that the Prime Minister has set out. And so I'm sort of pretty ambivalent about the result at the Supreme Court. I just think we should get on with it.
You of course, as we spoke to at the time, were hoping that the UK would remain in the European Union, and much of your constituency is in Mendip, which overall voted to remain in the European Union. Does that put you in a difficult position when it comes to making that decision at the vote?
No, I mean, I think actually my constituency is roughly sort of 58% Mendip, 42% Sedgemoor. The result in Mendip was 51-49 for Remain. The result in Sedgemoor was 60-40 for Leave. And so the sort of various statisticians that are worried about the results in constituencies have judged that the Wells constituency probably voted 53-47 for Leave. So if we're going to do it in that way, where I must merely in Parliament reflect the will of my constituents, my constituency did vote to Leave. But I think that people are quite right to say that MPs, of course, have to exercise their judgment in these matters too. And my view is that many of the things that had pushed me towards being a Remain voter back in May, June last year, was the sort of uncertainty of what might come after a Leave vote. And the reality is that the markets have not responded as we thought. There has not been the impact on inwards investment. There has not been the exodus of businesses from this country, whilst at the same time the European Union have continued with projects like the development of a European army and other sort of supranational organisations that really do demonstrate that the EU's intent is much, much more than the current economic union and that political union is desired. So I find myself sort of thinking, well, look, the result is not the one I had voted for, but given all the things that have happened since, and given that the will of my constituents is to Leave, given that the will of the country is to Leave, I'm actually very comfortable scrutinising whatever legislation comes before Parliament, scrutinising the deal that comes before Parliament when that time comes, but ultimately my inclination is to make sure that we follow through on the referendum result and that we leave the European Union.
What do you say to those people who are saying, and I'm sure you've read it in some of the newspapers, people criticising someone like Gina Miller, the businesswoman who brought this landmark case, saying, look, this is the elite showing their contempt for Brexit voters. You can understand that division that's there.
I think we have to dial down the language all round, to be honest with you. I see it on Facebook and in my mailbag as well. This really excites people's opinions. And Gina Miller and those who support her had the means to be able to bring a case. Admittedly, that is not something that the average man or woman on the street would have been able to do, but they were able to. They made their point. And arguably, our democracy and our legal system has worked exactly as it should. And a decision has been taken by an independent judiciary that Parliament must now react to. I don't bear any ill will to her whatsoever, nor do I bear any ill will to those who are passionately campaigning that we should be leaving as soon as possible. This issue excites quite strong emotions, but we can navigate those, I think, and come out with a good deal the other side.
Will you be told how to vote by the government?
I would imagine that this vote will be whipped quite keenly. But given that I'm already inclined to be voting towards it, that whipping isn't particularly relevant for me. And I also wouldn't mind betting, as I've just said, given that this excites such emotions, there will be plenty of people, or there will be some people, who on both sides of the House will defy the whip. I think, quite obviously the Conservative whip is going to want people to be supporting the government's position, which is to leave. What will be very, very interesting is how the Labour Party is whipped on this. And of course, all of this goes on, and the Liberal Democrats are sort of posturing that they will do all they can to block it. But they, like everybody else, will be aware that there are a big set of local elections coming up in May, and that inevitably how people behave in Parliament in the next 8 weeks as we bring through the Brexit legislation will translate into how people vote in May in those elections. And if people voted very strongly for leave and you have made a virtue out of trying to remain, well, stand by at the ballot box, I suspect.
James Heappey, good to have you with us. Thank you very much for coming on the show. James Heappey, the Conservative MP for Wells there.